defund, abolish the police, however you want to look at it, has been a useful smokescreen for both political parties. How do you think that hashtag has been weaponized to pivot a consensus of Americans into uh, using or ushering in more tough on crime policies?
Well, I think the first thing we have to realize where the abolish the police, defund the police came from. That is something that came out of liberal academia as a challenge to what was being viewed as onslaughts of police to poor and working class black people on social media videos.
Mhm.
And I will fundamentally argue that if you think that American capitalism is going to defund or defang the most important weapon to protecting its function, simply because you have a hashtag on Twitter, then you don't understand anything about politics, and you don't understand what the actual role of police are to the protection of capital in this country. And I think that was an example of how derailed the discourse coming out of academia had come from the reality of what politics and actual black life had become. Because as Cedric Johnson has demonstrated in his book on Black Lives Matter, is that there are black people in black neighborhoods who just they don't dislike the police. They don't like the negative ways the police treat them, but they just want the police to protect them better than they were being
Mhm.
protected before.
Mhm. What do you think about the critiques where police were just those departments were bloated and overfunded, and that money could have been used for other programs, maybe some poverty prevention programs? Um, we also had a moment during the defund the police, and I think we have to kind of look at this as not just the 2020 protests, but also we have to think about the 2018 elections. Those elections are important because you start to get district attorneys that are saying things like, I want in cash bail. Because one of the things that I think this moment talks about or highlights is mass incarceration, right? Mass incarceration is probably the sin of the 90s, right? That's the one big sin of the Clintons that a lot of people point to, besides all of his foreign policy, even besides welfare reform, mass incarceration. And it should be Joe Biden's sin as well. And Michelle Alexander writes her book, The New Jim Crow. Then there is the 13th documentary that Ava DuVernay does. And then that's kind of followed up by When They See Us, which is the story of the Central Park Five, who were unjustly accused and served time for a crime that they definitely didn't commit. So one of the things people are looking at is, not just policing, but also incarceration rates. Um, where do you think the defund rhetoric goes wrong or misses something there in that discussion?
I think that the anti-carceral politics of the early aughts was onto something, because we started to see even Republican political figures, even Donald Trump, would argue like, listen, this on a common sense level, locking up all these people just costs too much money, and we need to find a way to really uh, cut down the rate in which we do this. What the problematic nature is because the nature of the rhetoric did not measure the realistic expectations of people who live the life of working class communities
Mhm.
that deal with the police. It became an academic theory project
Mhm.
in terms of what we must be done, which is not surprising in terms of what happens after the new left of the 60s, when you have all of the activists go into academia, and now the center of left politics is in academia instead of actually the protest core. So we have foundations who are talking about defund, who are financing policy coming out of academia and think tanks that is totally divorced from the realizations of what people expect. And I think that's part of the problem. And not only that, after the George Floyd rebellions, crime actually starts to make a serious increase.
Yes.
And there's no theorization by those same radical radlib solutions to deal with the fact that now people are asking for more cops. And in some places the cops are like, well, 5 months ago you were talking about defund us. You don't need us, you don't want us. Now you're crying for more cops. And it caused the real conundrum in the left spaces for all those people who were making those arguments to say, oh, cops don't necessarily stop crime. Well, tell that to the mother who just had a 15-year-old son get shot in Chicago, whether or not she wants to have cops or not.
There's a weird, I've never understood the whole cops don't stop crime. Like, is that what you want cops to do? You want them to stop thought? Because you would have to have someone that has to stop something before it happens. And that's just never how the whole thing has worked in my mind. Do you think that whole framing is wrong? Cops don't stop crime?
I think it's a ridiculous. Oh, I mean, it's like, okay, cops don't stop crime. Do cops solve crime, or do cops slow down criminals?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like this kind of chicken and egg thinking. He's only something that could really come up again in the faculty lounge class. A faculty lounge or a class.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is like a pseudo argument. Ask people in those neighborhoods if cops work and find criminals, do they make you feel safer?
That's once the criminal is gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these are incorrect metrics that we're trying to assume by.